They thought they were teaching a lesson to just another black kid in Westridge's white neighborhoods. Rough him up, plant some drugs, throw him in a cell. Standard procedure for Lieutenant Jensen and the police force that billionaire Randall Stokes had bought years ago. What they didn't check was the boy's last name. Zion Matthews never mentioned that his uncle ran the Department of Justice, never flaunted that connection, just stayed quiet, studied hard, and kept to himself. But when Solomon Matthews' calls to his nephew go unanswered, and videos of the arrest hit social media, the machine that's corrupted Westridge for decades is about to face something it can't bribe, intimidate, or control. A man with enough federal power to burn their entire system to the ground. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The sun dipped below the horizon as Zion Matthews packed his textbooks into his backpack. The library's fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the empty tables. He glanced at his watch. 7:45 p.m. Later than Buzzati, he'd planned to stay, but Jason had needed extra help with calculus before tomorrow's test. "You're a lifesaver, Zion," Jason had said, relief flooding his face when he finally understood the concept. "Mr. Peterson would have failed me for sure." Zion had simply nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Helping others came naturally to him, even if he rarely sought the spotlight for himself. At 17, Zion was used to blending into the background. Tall and lean with deep brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around him, he moved through Westridge High with quiet confidence. Not quite invisible, but intentionally low-key. "Closing in 15 minutes, called Mrs. Winters, the elderly librarian. She peered over her glasses at Zion and smiled warmly. "Another tutoring session?" "Yes, ma'am." "Jason's getting better, though." Mrs. Winters nodded approvingly. "That boy is lucky to have you as a friend. Do you need a ride home? It's getting dark." "No thanks. My aunt's house is just across Maple District. I'll be fine." Stepping out into the cool evening air, Zion zipped up his navy blue hoodie. Westridge was an affluent town, its streets lined with pristine colonial homes and manicured lawns, but the welcoming facade masked deeper tensions. For the past 3 years, he'd lived here with his Aunt Patricia, his mother's sister, after his parents moved overseas for work. The arrangement had advantages. Westridge High had better academic opportunities than his old school in Chicago, and his aunt's spacious home gave him plenty of room to study. What most people didn't know, what Zion deliberately kept quiet, was that his uncle, his father's brother, was Solomon Matthews, the United States Attorney General. Zion had never leaned on that connection. He wanted to succeed on his own merits, not because people feared crossing someone with powerful relatives. "You're too humble for your own good," his aunt had told him once, shaking her head. "Sometimes connections matter." But Zion disagreed. "If I'm going to Princeton next year, I want it to be because I earned it." His phone buzzed in his pocket as he walked past the park at the center of town. A text from Aunt Patricia. "Dinner in the microwave when you get home. Love you." He smiled, typing back a quick reply before continuing his walk. The quickest route home would take him through Oakwood Heights, one of the wealthier and whiter neighborhoods in town. He'd walked this way many times before without incident, but tonight something felt different. The streets seemed quieter, the house lights more watchful. As he passed a particularly grand colonial with white columns flanking the entrance, Zion noticed a middle-aged woman standing at her window, phone pressed to her ear, eyes locked on him. Something in her gaze made him uncomfortable, but he kept walking, eyes forward, pace steady. What Zion didn't know was that inside that house, Catherine Wilson was making a call that would change everything. 911, what's your emergency? "There's a suspicious young man walking past my house," Catherine said, voice hushed as if Zion might hear her through the double-paned windows. "He's wearing a hoodie, and I've never seen him in this neighborhood before." "Can you describe this person?" He's black, tall, wearing a dark hoodie. He's just walking slowly, looking at houses. Is he doing anything threatening?" "Not exactly, but he doesn't belong here." "This is a safe neighborhood," the dispatcher sighed imperceptibly. We'll send an officer to check it out. On the other end of that dispatch call was Lieutenant Wade Jensen, a 16-year veteran of the Westridge Police Department. At 42, Jensen had the hardened physique of someone who spent more time at the gym than necessary, with a crew cut that emphasized his square jaw and cold blue eyes. As the call came through, he was sitting in his patrol car with Officer Trevor Ross, a rookie barely 6 months out of the academy. Jensen's tight smile revealed nothing good as he started the engine. Got a suspicious person call in Oakwood Heights. Time to show you how we handle outsiders in the nice neighborhoods. Ross shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat. At 26, he still retained some of the idealism that had led him to law enforcement in the first place, helping people, protecting the community. But in his short time in Westridge, he'd seen enough to make him question whether those ideals were shared by his colleagues. What exactly did dispatch say? Ross asked. Black male in a hoodie, looking at houses, probably casing the place. That's not much to go on. Jensen's laugh held no humor. In Oakwood Heights, that's more than enough. What Officer Ross didn't fully understand yet was that Lieutenant Jensen didn't just work for the Westridge Police Department. His true allegiance lay with Randall Stokes, the town's wealthiest and most influential resident. A real estate developer who transformed Westridge over the past decade, Stokes had his hand in every aspect of local governance, from funding the mayor's campaign to ensuring the police department had the latest equipment. In exchange, officers like Jensen made sure Stokes's interests were protected, his enemies intimidated, and any threats to his power quickly neutralized. Jensen had risen through the ranks not by solving crimes, but by knowing which ones to ignore and which ones to manufacture. Meanwhile, Zion walked on, oblivious to the patrol car now turning onto the street behind him. His mind was on tomorrow's AP Physics presentation and the college application essay he needed to finish this weekend. A soft melody played in his head, some song his mother used to sing when he was younger. The sound of tires on pavement broke his reverie. Red and blue lights suddenly illuminated the street around him, casting eerie shadows across the pristine lawns. Zion stopped, confused. He hadn't been jaywalking or littering. He hadn't done anything wrong. The patrol car pulled up alongside. Him and 2 officers stepped out. The older one, Jensen, approached with his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. The younger officer, Ross, hung back slightly, eyeing Zion with a mixture of caution and something that might have been apology. Evening, Jensen said, his voice carrying an edge that set Zion's nerves on edge. Mind telling me what you're doing in this neighborhood? Zion kept his voice steady, remembering everything his parents had taught him about encounters with police. Just walking home from the library, sir. I live with my aunt on Elm Street. Got some ID on you? Zion nodded slowly, reaching carefully into his back pocket for his wallet. May I ask what this is about? Did I do something wrong? That was all the opening Jensen needed. His face hardened as he stepped closer. You questioning me, boy? No. Sir, hands against the car, now! Zion froze, confusion and fear battling for control. Sir, I don't understand. Jensen moved with practiced efficiency, grabbing Zion's arm and shoving him against the patrol car. The sudden impact knocked the breath from Zion's lungs. When an officer gives you an order, you comply. That's how this works. Jensen's voice was low, meant only for Zion's ears. People in this neighborhood don't need to be worried about someone like you walking around at night. Officer Ross watched, a knot forming in his stomach. This wasn't right. The kid wasn't doing anything threatening, wasn't resisting. But to speak up now would mean crossing Jensen, and Ross had seen what happened to officers who did that. Jensen began roughly patting Zion down. What's in the backpack? Anything I should know about? Just books, sir. Textbooks. At that moment, Zion's phone began ringing in his pocket. A familiar ringtone, his Uncle Solomon calling for their weekly check-in. If he could just answer. Explain the situation. What's that? Jensen demanded, hearing the ringtone. My phone, sir. It's just my uncle calling. Jensen reached into Zion's pocket and pulled out the smartphone. The screen showed an incoming call from Uncle Saul with a Washington, D.C. area code. D.C., huh? Got friends in high places? Jensen's tone was mocking. "It's just my uncle," Zion repeated, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. If he could just talk to Solomon, this nightmare would end instantly. Instead, Jensen held the phone up, examining it for a moment before deliberately dropping it onto the pavement. The screen shattered with a sickening crack as Jensen's boot came down on top of it. "Oops," he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "Thought it might be a weapon." Zion stared in disbelief at the destroyed phone, his only connection to help now lying in pieces on the ground. For the first time, real fear began to take hold. In that moment, he wasn't the nephew of the U.S. Attorney General. He was just another black teenager being harassed by police for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And as the red and blue lights continued to flash across the perfect houses of Oakwood Heights, no one came out to witness what was happening. No one except Catherine Wilson, who watched from behind her curtains, somehow both vindicated and unsettled by the scene playing out on her street. In his Washington office, Solomon Matthews frowned at his phone. Zion always answered his calls. Always. He tried again, but this time the call went straight to voicemail. A small worry began to form, one that would soon grow into something much larger and more dangerous for everyone involved. Zion felt the cold metal of the patrol car against his cheek as Lieutenant Jensen continued the search. Officer Ross stood nearby, his expression unreadable in the flashing lights. The night had turned surreal, a nightmare Zion couldn't wake up from. "Well, what do we have here?" Jensen's voice took on a theatrical quality as he pulled something from Zion's pocket. A small plastic bag containing white powder. "Looks like we got ourselves a dealer." Zion's eyes widened in shock. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." His mind raced. He didn't do drugs, had never touched them. The bag must have been planted during the pat-down. "They all say that," Jensen replied with a smirk, holding the bag up for Ross to see. "Officer Ross, we've got possession with intent to distribute." Ross stared at the bag, then at Zion's terrified face. The doubt must have shown in his eyes because Jensen's voice hardened when he spoke again. "Officer Ross, secure the suspect while I document the evidence." Something wasn't right. Ross had been watching Jensen throughout the pat-down and had seen a suspicious movement, Jensen's hand going to his own pocket just before discovering the drugs. But questioning a superior officer, especially one with Jensen's reputation, wasn't something a rookie did if he wanted to keep his job. Reluctantly, Ross stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around slowly." Zion complied, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Officer, please, that bag isn't mine. He put it there." Their eyes met briefly, and Ross saw the raw fear and desperation in Zion's gaze. For a moment, something like guilt flickered across Ross's face, but it disappeared as quickly as it had. "Come. Hands behind your back," he said, his voice quieter than before. As Ross reached for his handcuffs, Jensen suddenly grabbed Zion's shoulder and slammed him to the pavement. "He's resisting! Stop resisting!" But Zion wasn't resisting, couldn't resist with Jensen's knee pressing into his back, forcing the air from his lungs. Pain exploded across his face as his cheek hit the concrete. He tasted blood where his lip had split open. "Please," he gasped. "I'm not—" "Shut up," Jensen growled, twisting Zion's arm behind his back with unnecessary force. "You're under arrest for possession of narcotics and resisting arrest." The commotion had drawn attention. Lights were coming on in nearby houses, and a few neighbors had ventured onto their porches to see what was happening. Among them was Linda Gates, a local community organizer who lived 2 doors down from Catherine Wilson. Unlike her neighbor, Linda didn't see a threat when she looked at Zion. She saw a teenager being brutalized by police. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and began recording. "Police brutality in Oakwood Heights," she narrated quietly as she filmed. "Young black man being assaulted by officers. This is happening right now, May 12th, just after 8 p.m. Jensen noticed the gathering crowd and the phones being raised. His eyes locked on Linda, whose camera was pointed directly at him. With Zion now handcuffed and bleeding on the ground, Jensen stalked toward Linda, his badge gleaming in the streetlights. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording and step back. This is a police matter." Linda stood her ground. I have every right to record. This is a public space. Jensen moved closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I'd be careful where you point that camera. Accidents happen in this town, especially to people who don't mind their own business. The threat hung in the air between them. Linda's hand trembled slightly, but she kept filming. Are you threatening me, Lieutenant? Just giving some friendly advice. Jensen's smile never reached his eyes. You've got a nice house here. Be a shame if something happened to it. Before Linda could respond, Ross called out, Lieutenant, we need to transport the suspect. Jensen gave Linda one last warning look before turning back to where Zion lay on the ground, Ross standing uncomfortably beside him. With rougher than necessary movements, Jensen hauled Zion to his feet and marched him to the patrol car. You've got the right to remain silent, Jensen recited mechanically as he shoved Zion into the back seat. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the door slammed shut, Zion caught a final glimpse of the neighborhood. Through the window, the manicured lawns, the perfect houses, the faces of people watching without intervening. Then Officer Ross slid into the driver's seat, and Lieutenant Jensen settled in beside him, and they were moving, taking Zion away from everything familiar and safe. Inside the patrol car, silence reigned. Zion's mind raced with panic and confusion. How had a simple walk home turned into this? What would happen to him now? Would Aunt Patricia know where to find him? And the drugs, how would he prove they weren't his? His thoughts were interrupted by the crackling of the police radio as a call came through. Chief wants an update on the Oakwood Heights situation, the dispatcher announced. Jensen picked up the radio. Tell the chief we apprehended a suspect in possession of narcotics, bringing him in now. After he signed off, Jensen turned to Ross with a satisfied expression. Nice work tonight, rookie. You're learning how things operate in Westridge. Ross kept his eyes on the road. The drugs, what about them? Jensen's tone made it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. Nothing. Sir, Ross replied after a moment, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and his jaw was clenched tight. Across town, in a sprawling mansion overlooking Westridge Lake, Randall Stokes was enjoying an evening bourbon when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Mayor Kessler. Stokes answered with a smile. Dwight, what can I do for you this fine evening? Mayor Dwight Kessler's voice was tense. Randall, there's been an incident in Oakwood Heights. One of your special officers made an arrest. And this concerns me because people were filming Randall. It's already on social media. The kid looks young, and from what I'm hearing, it got rough. Stokes swirled the amber liquid in his glass unperturbed. Jensen knows how to handle these situations. What's the charge? Drug possession, resisting arrest. But Randall, if this blows up, it won't, Stokes interrupted. Make sure the chief keeps a lid on this. No press statements, no body camera footage released. Standard procedure. And the judge? I'll call Leon myself. The kid will be denied bail, kept quiet until this blows over. Just another drug bust in Westridge. Nothing newsworthy. After hanging up, Stokes made a mental note to increase Chief McAdams's monthly bonus. Good help was expensive, but worth every penny when situations like this arose. Meanwhile, at the Westridge police station, Zion was being processed. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal items confiscated. His requests to call his aunt were ignored as he was led to a holding cell and locked inside. The cell was small and smelled of bleach and sweat. A metal bench ran along one wall, and a stainless steel toilet stood in the corner with no privacy screen. Zion sat on the bench, his head in his hands, trying to control his breathing and quiet the panic threatening to overwhelm him. First time, in the system? A voice asked. Zion looked up to see an older black man watching him from the adjacent cell. The man's face was lined with experience, his eyes knowing. I shouldn't be here at all, Zion replied. Those drugs weren't mine. The officer planted them, the old man nodded slowly. Welcome to Westridge Justice, son. I've been in and out of here for 20 years. If Jensen was involved, you're in for a rough ride. You know him? Everybody knows Jensen. Man's been Stokes' attack dog since he joined the force. They target folks like us to keep the town how Stokes wants it. Wealthy, quiet, and white. Who's Stokes? The old man looked surprised. You living in Westridge and don't know Randall Stokes? Man owns half the town. The mayor, the police chief, the judge. They all answer to him. Folks who cross Stokes tend to disappear one way or another. A chill ran down Zion's spine. The situation was worse than he'd thought. I need to call my aunt, he said. They haven't let me make a phone call. They won't, the old man replied. Not until they're ready. That's how they break you down. Isolation, uncertainty. By the time you see a judge, you'll be ready to plead guilty to whatever they say just to get out. For the first time, real despair threatened to take hold of Zion. But then he thought of his Uncle Solomon. If anyone could help him now, it was the U.S. Attorney General. My uncle, he whispered, more to himself than his cell block companion. When he finds out. But would Solomon find out? Zion's phone had been destroyed, and he hadn't been allowed to contact anyone. For all his aunt and uncle knew, he was still at the library or walking home. How long before they realized something was wrong? Across the station, Officer Trevor Ross sat at his desk, filling out the arrest report. The words on the screen blurred as he thought about what had happened, what he had allowed to happen. Jensen had planted evidence, brutalized a teenager, for no reason, and Ross had stood by and let it happen. Academy training seemed a lifetime ago. To protect and serve. What a joke. In Westridge, it was to intimidate and control, and now he was part of it. His phone buzzed with a text message from his fiancée. How's your shift going? Still on for dinner tomorrow? Ross stared at the innocent message, guilt gnawing at him. What would Emily think if she knew what he'd done tonight? Emily, who worked as a public defender, who believed in justice and fairness. Before he could respond, Chief McAdams emerged from his office and called out, Ross, my office now. Ross found Chief McAdams sitting behind his desk, Lieutenant Jensen standing beside him like a faithful guard dog. At 55, McAdams had the soft physique of a man who spent more time behind a desk than on patrol, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. Officer Ross, McAdams began, I understand you assisted Lieutenant Jensen in a drug arrest tonight. Yes, sir. Good work. Lieutenant Jensen speaks highly of your performance. Ross glanced at Jensen, who gave him a warning look. Thank you. Sir, Ross replied, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. I want to be clear about something, McAdams continued, leaning forward. This department operates as a team. What happens on patrol stays between partners. The suspect is claiming the drugs were planted. Standard defense tactic, we've seen it before. Of course, sir. There will be no body camera footage released, no statements to the press. This is a routine drug arrest, nothing more. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. As Ross turned to leave, McAdams added, One more thing. I hear the suspect is asking for a phone call. That won't be happening tonight. Technical issues with the phone system. Ross nodded stiffly and left the office, feeling Jensen's eyes on his back the entire time. Outside in the parking lot, Ross leaned against his car, struggling to breathe. What had he gotten himself into? This wasn't law enforcement. It was organized corruption. He wasn't the only one questioning the events of the night. FBI agent Cole Matthews sat in an unmarked car across from the police station, watching the comings and goings of officers. At 34, Matthews had spent the last 6 months undercover in Westridge, investigating reports of systemic corruption within the town's power structure. Tonight's arrest had pinged his radar immediately. Social media was already filling, with video clips of the incident, and Matthews's sources inside the department had mentioned a rush to process the suspect with unusual secrecy. Matthews pulled out his secure phone and dialed a number known to only a handful of people. Sir, something's happening in Westridge. I think we might have the break we've been looking for. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Solomon Matthews set down his phone after a third failed attempt to reach his nephew. Concern was rapidly becoming alarm. Zion was reliable, responsible. He always answered or called back promptly. Solomon's assistant appeared at his door. "Sir, there's something you might want to see." She placed a tablet on his desk, showing a social media post. Grainy footage of a young black man being slammed to the ground by police in what looked like an affluent neighborhood. The caption read, "Police brutality in Westridge tonight. Share before it gets taken down." Solomon's blood ran cold as he recognized his nephew's face, bloodied and terrified, in the flashing police lights. His finger was already on the intercom button. "Get me the governor of New York, now." Back in the holding cell, Zion had finally given in to exhaustion, dozing fitfully on the hard bench. He didn't know that forces were already in motion, forces that would shake Westridge to its foundations and bring down one of the most powerful men in the state. For now, though, he was just a 17-year-old boy, alone and afraid, trapped in a system designed to crush people like him. As the night deepened, the first seeds of a conflict that would soon engulf the entire town were being planted, a conflict that would test loyalties, expose corruptions, and ultimately change Westridge forever. Solomon Matthews paced the length of his Washington office, phone pressed to his ear. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the polished hardwood floor, but he hadn't slept. Not since seeing that video. "Governor Wilson, I appreciate you taking my call at this hour," Solomon said, his voice controlled despite the fury bubbling beneath the surface. "My nephew has been detained in Westridge under false charges. I need your intervention." On the other end, the governor of New York sounded genuinely alarmed. "Attorney General Matthews, this is the first I'm hearing of this. I'll look into it immediately." "I expect a call back within the hour," Solomon replied, ending the call before the governor could respond. His assistant, Elaine, appeared in the doorway. "Sir, I've been making calls to Westridge. No one at the police department will confirm they have Zion in custody." Solomon's jaw tightened. "Book me on the next flight to New York, and get me everything we have on Westridge. Property, records, political donations, court cases. Something isn't right in that town." As Solomon's team scrambled to gather information, a very different meeting was taking place in Westridge. In the penthouse suite of the Stokes Tower overlooking the town square, Randall Stokes surveyed his domain through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 62, Stokes had the polished appearance of old money, though his fortune was entirely self-made. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive suit tailored to hide the slight paunch of middle age, he exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to getting his way. "Tell me again why this arrest matters," Stokes said without turning from the window. Behind him, Mayor Dwight Kessler shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Police Chief McAdams stood stiffly at attention. Lieutenant Jensen lounged against the bar, helping himself to Stokes's premium scotch. "The kid's clean," Chief McAdams explained. "Honor student, no record. And there's video of the arrest circulating. People are asking questions." "So what?" Stokes turned, fixing cold gray eyes on the chief. "We've handled problematic arrests before." Mayor Kessler cleared his throat. "Randall, there's something else. The boy's name is Zion Matthews." Stokes raised an eyebrow. "Should that mean something to me?" "We ran a background check. His uncle is Solomon Matthews. The Attorney General?" For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed Stokes's face. "Why wasn't I told this immediately?" "We just confirmed it," Chief McAdams said, shooting a glare at Jensen, who merely shrugged. "Kid never mentioned it," Jensen said, swirling his drink. "Not that I gave him much chance to talk." Stokes set his glass down with deliberate care. "So, we have the Attorney General's nephew in our jail on drug charges that we all know are fabricated. Meanwhile, the feds are already sniffing around my development deals." He fixed each man with a penetrating stare. "Gentlemen, this could be inconvenient. We could release him," Mayor Kessler suggested. "Claim it was all a misunderstanding." "And look weak?" Stokes shook his head. "No, we need to control this narrative. The drugs were found in his possession. That's the official story. He's a troublemaker using his uncle's position to try to escape consequences." "What about the body cam footage?" Chief McAdams asked. Stokes smiled thinly. I believe your department has been experiencing technical difficulties with its equipment. Such a shame. Already handled, Jensen confirmed. System malfunction, nothing recorded. And the witnesses with cell phones? Mayor Kessler pressed. Leave that to me, Stokes replied. Now I want this handled quickly and quietly. Chief, make sure the boy remains in custody. Deny bail when he goes before Judge Graves tomorrow. Chief McAdams nodded. Leon will do whatever you ask. And find out everything you can about who this kid has been in contact with locally. Anyone who might cause problems for us. As the meeting concluded, Stokes held Jensen back with a gesture. Once they were alone, he fixed the lieutenant with a hard stare. Of all the kids in town, you had to harass the Attorney General's nephew? Jensen had the good sense to look uncomfortable. Bad luck, boss. How was I supposed to know? You weren't. But now we have a situation. Stokes walked to his desk and removed an envelope. This contains $5,000. Go visit Linda Gates, the woman who filmed the arrest. Make the video disappear. And if she refuses, be creative. Stokes' smile didn't reach his eyes. But no marks, nothing that can be traced back to us. Meanwhile, Solomon Matthews had received a troubling anonymous call. The voice on the other end was male, disguised, speaking quickly as if afraid of being overheard. Your nephew is being held at Westridge Police Station. No bail hearing scheduled until tomorrow. The drugs were planted by Lieutenant Wade Jensen, on orders from Randall Stokes. Who is this? Solomon demanded. How do you know? Doesn't matter. What matters is Stokes runs everything in Westridge, the mayor, the police, the courts. Your nephew was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but now they know who he is. They'll make an example of him. Why are you telling me this? A pause. Because some of us are sick of what Stokes has done to this town. Be careful. People who cross him have a habit of disappearing. The line went dead, leaving Solomon with more questions than answers. But one name stood out. Randall Stokes. Elaine, he called to his assistant. I need everything we have on Randall Stokes of Westridge, New York. And get me the FBI director on the line. While Solomon began marshaling his considerable resources, Linda Gates was facing her own battle. The local activist had uploaded her video of Zion's arrest to multiple social media platforms, where it had quickly gained attention. But just as quickly, the videos were being removed for community standards violations, a clear sign of Stokes' influence with the tech platforms, where he held significant investments. Undeterred, Linda had sent copies to several national news outlets and civil rights organizations. She was in the middle of an email to the ACLU when a sharp knock came at her door. Through the peephole, she saw Lieutenant Jensen standing on her porch, a forced smile on his face. Linda's hand trembled as she opened the door, keeping the security chain latched. Lieutenant, she said coolly, what brings you here? Ms. Gates, Jensen replied, his tone falsely pleasant. I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. I'd like to discuss the video you took. There's nothing to discuss. What I saw was police brutality, plain and simple. Jensen's smile hardened. That video is causing unnecessary trouble for everyone involved. I'm authorized to offer you compensation for your inconvenience. He held up an envelope. $5,000. All you need to do is delete the video and sign a statement that you may have misinterpreted what you saw. Linda's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to bribe me, Lieutenant? I'm offering a reasonable solution to an unfortunate situation. The answer is no. Now please leave before I call your superiors. Jensen laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. My superiors sent me here, Ms. Gates. This isn't just about one arrest. You're interfering with the way things work in Westridge. Then, maybe things in Westridge need to change. Something dangerous flashed in Jensen's eyes. Last chance, take the money. Goodbye, Lieutenant. As she closed the door, Jensen called out, Think about your home, Ms. Gates. Your job, your safety. Accidents happen to troublemakers in this town. Linda leaned against the closed door, heart pounding. She knew the threat wasn't idle. Stokes and his enforcers had silenced critics before. But something about that young man's terrified face in the police lights steeled her resolve. She reached for her phone and dialed a number few. In town dared to call, FBI tip line. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with whoever is investigating corruption in Westridge. It's about last night's arrest. In the courthouse across town, Judge Leon Graves received a visitor in his chambers. At 65, Graves had served on the bench for over 20 years, his once keen legal mind now dulled by cynicism and corrupted by Stokes's generous financial gestures. Judge Graves, Randall Stokes greeted him, settling into a leather chair without waiting for an invitation. We need to discuss tomorrow's bail hearing. Graves sighed. Randall, I've heard about the Matthews boy. This is different from our usual arrangements. His uncle is the Attorney General, for God's sake. Which is precisely why we need to send a message, Stokes replied. Deny bail. Cite flight risk, potential danger to the community, whatever you need to. Just keep him locked up. The evidence is flimsy at best. Any decent lawyer will tear it apart. Stokes leaned forward. Then make sure he doesn't get a decent lawyer. Appoint someone from the public defender's office, preferably someone new, someone who won't make waves. And if the Attorney General himself shows up? He won't. He'll send underlings, try to work through proper channels. By then, we'll have had time to construct a more convincing narrative. Stokes removed an envelope from his jacket and placed it on the desk. Your quarterly consultation fee, Judge. I've included a bonus for the special circumstances. Judge Graves stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. This could be the one that brings it all down, Randall. Only if you lose your nerve. Stokes stood to leave. Remember who paid for your daughter's Ivy League education, who covered your gambling debts, who owns the mortgage on your lake house. As Stokes left, Judge Graves finally reached for the envelope, hating himself but seeing no way out. At the Westridge police station, Zion had spent a sleepless night in the holding cell. His face ached where it had hit the pavement, and his wrists were raw from the too tight handcuffs. But worse than the physical discomfort was the uncertainty. No one would tell him when he could call his aunt, when he would see a judge, or what exactly he was being charged with. The cell door clanged open, and Officer Trevor Ross appeared, looking uncomfortable. Matthews, let's go. You're being moved to a proper cell. As Ross escorted him down the hallway, Zion tried again. Please, I need to call my aunt. She doesn't know where I am. Ross glanced around to ensure they were alone. Look, I can't let you make a call. Orders from above. But I saw what happened last night. That wasn't right. Hope flared in Zion's chest. Then help me. It's not that simple, Ross whispered. This town, this department, it's controlled by Randall Stokes. Cross him, and you disappear. So you're just going to let an innocent person go to jail? Ross looked away. Your bail hearing is tomorrow. Judge Graves will be presiding. Is he fair? A bitter laugh escaped Ross. He's on Stokes's payroll, like everyone else in power here. As they reached the cell block, Ross hesitated. Your uncle, is he really the Attorney General? Zion nodded slowly. Then pray he finds out what's happening, because that's your only hope in Westridge. Meanwhile, local media had begun reporting on Zion's arrest, but with a decidedly biased slant. The Westridge Chronicle, owned by a Stokes subsidiary, ran the headline. Attorney General's nephew arrested on drug charges, claims special treatment. The article contained numerous falsehoods, including claims that Zion had a previous juvenile record that had been sealed, a complete fabrication. It quoted anonymous sources describing Zion as a troublemaker who had been involved in multiple disciplinary incidents at school, another lie. Across town, Zion's Aunt Patricia was frantic. She had called hospitals, friends, and finally, the police station, where she was told only that Zion had been arrested and was being held pending a bail hearing. What are the charges? She demanded. Drug possession and resisting arrest, the desk sergeant replied mechanically. That's ridiculous. My nephew doesn't do drugs. I need to see him immediately. Visiting hours are over for today, ma'am. You can attend the bail hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. After the call ended, Patricia did the only thing she could think of. She called her brother-in-law. Solomon, they've arrested Zion on trumped-up charges. They won't let me see him. Something is very wrong here. Solomon's voice was calm but deadly serious. Patricia, listen carefully. I'm already working on this. I'll be in Westridge by morning. Don't talk to anyone about this, especially not the media. And if anyone from the police department contacts you, tell them nothing without a lawyer present. Solomon, I'm scared. The police in this town, they're not like normal police. I know. Randall Stokes has been on our radar for other reasons. This may have just accelerated our timeline. As night fell over Westridge, the pieces were moving into place for what would become a battle for the soul of the town. Stokes believed his power and influence were enough to quash any threat, even one connected to the U.S. Attorney General. But he had underestimated the determination of a man fighting for his family. And in the shadows, FBI agent Cole Matthews was making his own moves. After receiving Linda Gates's call, he had reached out to his handler. "Sir, we have a credible witness to police misconduct connected to the Stokes investigation. And there's more. The victim is related to Attorney General Matthews." "Tread carefully, Matthews," his supervisor warned. "Stokes has friends in high places, but this could be the break we've been waiting for." "I'm meeting with a potential whistleblower inside the department tomorrow. Things are starting to crack." That whistleblower was Officer Trevor Ross, who had finally reached his breaking point. As he sat in his apartment that night, staring at his police badge, he made the decision that would change everything. He couldn't be part of this system anymore. Tomorrow, he would tell Agent Matthews everything about Jensen planting evidence, about Stokes's control of the department, about the countless other abuses he'd witnessed in his short time on the force. It would likely end his career. It might even put his life in danger. But as he thought of Zion Matthews sitting alone in a cell for a crime he didn't commit, Ross knew he couldn't live with himself if he stayed silent. Little did he know, the conflict that was about to erupt would shake Westridge to its core, forcing everyone to choose sides in a battle between corruption and justice. As dawn broke over Westridge, Solomon Matthews arrived at the small regional airport in a private Justice Department jet. The Attorney General of the United States stepped onto the tarmac, flanked by 2 federal agents and his chief of staff. His face was a mask of controlled fury. A black SUV waited to take him directly to Randall Stokes's office. No appointments, no warnings. This would not be a diplomatic visit. Stokes was reviewing development plans for his newest luxury complex when his assistant burst in, flustered. "Sir, Attorney General Matthews is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting." Before she could finish, Solomon pushed past her into the office, his imposing 6'3" frame filling the doorway. "Mr. Stokes," Solomon said, his deep voice deceptively calm. "I believe you're holding my nephew on fabricated charges." Stokes recovered quickly, rising to extend his hand. "Attorney General Matthews, what an unexpected honor. I've heard about your nephew's situation. A regrettable misunderstanding, I'm sure." Solomon ignored the outstretched hand. "Let's not pretend, Mr. Stokes. I know who you are and how you operate. I've been building a case against your organization for months. The only reason we haven't moved yet is that we've been methodical, gathering evidence, following money trails." Stokes's smile faltered slightly. "That sounds like an abuse of power, using federal resources for a personal vendetta." "It would be, if that's what was happening. But our investigation into your corruption began long before you targeted my nephew." Solomon placed both hands on Stokes's desk, leaning forward. "Release Zion. Drop all charges. Make this right, and perhaps we can discuss terms that don't end with you in a federal penitentiary." Stokes leaned back in his chair, regaining his composure. "Attorney General, I understand you're upset. Family matters can cloud our judgment. But I have no authority to release anyone or drop charges. That's the domain of our local justice system." "A system you own." A crude characterization. Stokes stood, matching Solomon's height. "Look, we both know how power works. Your jurisdiction ends at the state line. This is a local matter, and in Westridge, local matters are handled locally." Solomon's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Mr. Stokes, you've made a mistake. A big one. You think your money protects you, that your influence in this small town makes you untouchable. You're wrong. Is that a threat, Attorney General? No, it's a promise." Solomon straightened and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "You have 24 hours to release my nephew and issue a public apology. After that, the full weight of federal law enforcement descends on Westridge. Enjoy your empire while it lasts." After Solomon left, Stokes immediately called Lieutenant Jensen. "The Attorney General just threatened me in my own office. Accelerate our timeline. I want his nephew transferred to county tomorrow after the bail hearing. Once he's in the system, Matthews will have to back off and work through proper channels." "And if he doesn't back off," Jensen asked, "then we make it clear that his nephew's safety can't be guaranteed in county lockup. Accidents happen. While Stokes and his allies were plotting, Solomon was taking direct action. His first stop after leaving Stokes Tower was the FBI field office in Albany, where he met with the special agent in charge and Agent Cole Matthews. Agent Matthews has been undercover in Westridge for 6 months, the SAC explained. "We've been building a RICO case against Stokes and his network, but it's been slow going. His people are careful." Solomon studied the evidence board, which detailed Stokes's organization, politicians, judges, police officers, all connected by red string to the billionaire at the center. "Tell me what you have so far," Solomon said. Agent Matthews gestured to the files spread across the table. "Financial irregularities in development deals, witness statements about intimidation, suspicious deaths ruled as accidents or suicides, but nothing concrete enough for an indictment. Stokes is smart. He keeps his hands clean." "Until now," Solomon replied. "My nephew's arrest changes things. It gives us leverage, a way to force mistakes." "With all due respect, sir," the SAC interjected, "using your nephew's situation to advance our case is exactly what we're going to do," Solomon finished firmly. Zion would be the first to agree. This isn't just about him anymore. It's about everyone in Westridge who suffered under Stokes's corruption. Agent Matthews nodded. "I may have something to help. I'm meeting with a potential whistleblower today, Officer Trevor Ross, who was present during your nephew's arrest." "Good. Record everything, and get me a meeting with Linda Gates, the woman who filmed the arrest." As the federal forces mobilized, Officer Trevor Ross sat in a coffee shop 3 towns over, nervously checking his watch. He had taken personal time today, citing a family emergency. In reality, he was about to commit what many in the Westridge Police Department would consider the ultimate betrayal. Agent Matthews slid into the booth across from him, casually dressed in jeans and a windbreaker. "Officer Ross, I'm Cole Matthews." Ross glanced around anxiously. "I shouldn't be here. If Jensen or the chief found out—" "They won't," Matthews assured him. "Everything you tell me stays confidential until you're ready to go on record." Ross took a deep breath. "I've only been on the force 6 months. At first, I thought some of the things I was seeing were just how things worked in small towns, but it's systematic. The targeting of minorities, the cover-ups, the way certain people get special treatment. Tell me about Zion Matthews' arrest." "Jensen planted the drugs," Ross said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw him do it. The kid wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking home. But Jensen saw a black teenager in an upscale neighborhood and decided to make an example of him. Would you testify to that?" Ross stared into his coffee. "I have a fiancé. We're planning a future. If I go against Stokes, we can protect you," Matthews said. "Witness protection, a new start somewhere else if necessary." "You don't understand. Stokes doesn't just control Westridge. He has connections everywhere. People who've crossed him have disappeared or ended up dead in accidents. Even outside of town." Matthews leaned forward. "The U.S. Attorney General is personally involved now. This is bigger than Stokes." After a long pause, Ross nodded. "I'll do it. But not just about Zion's arrest. About everything. The bribes, the evidence tampering, the beatings, all of it." Back in Westridge, Lieutenant Jensen was dealing with a different kind of problem. He had just entered a local bar known for its discretion, where several off-duty officers were already drinking despite the early hour. "The AG himself showed up," Jensen announced, ordering a whiskey. "Stokes says he made threats." Officer Daniels, a veteran with 15 years on the force, snorted. "What's he gonna do? This is Stokes's town. Nobody can touch him." "Exactly," Jensen agreed, downing his drink. Matthews might be hot shit in D.C., but around here, he's just another suit with a badge. What Jensen didn't know was that a woman in the corner booth was recording every word on her phone. 20 minutes of unguarded conversation captured Jensen, discussing previous cover-ups, bribes, and even joking about planting evidence on troublemakers. The woman, a local teacher named Sarah Parker, had been quietly gathering evidence for months. Her brother had been one of Stokes's victims, falsely arrested, pressured into a plea deal, his life ruined. As Jensen and his colleagues continued their unguarded conversation, Sarah slipped out and immediately called the number Agent Matthews had given her. Meanwhile, a different kind of exposé was taking shape online. An anonymous account had just uploaded a comprehensive dataset showing arrest statistics for Westridge over the past 5 years. The numbers were damning. Black residents, who made up only 15% of the town's population, accounted for over 60% of arrests. More concerning, almost 70% of those cases were eventually dismissed for lack of evidence, but only after defendants had spent weeks or months in jail. The data had been compiled by a hacker named Alex Gardner, who had accessed the police department's internal database. Along with the statistics, Alex had released internal emails discussing keeping certain neighborhoods clean and sending messages to minority residents who moved into upscale areas. The post quickly went viral, drawing national attention to Westridge. Justice for Zion began trending as people connected the data to the video of Zion's arrest. In his office, Mayor Dwight Kessler stared at his computer screen in horror as the story spread. His phone rang. "Stokes, have you seen this?" Kessler asked, without preamble. "Of course I've seen it," Stokes snapped. "Find out who leaked this and shut them down, and get our media people to counter the narrative. Talk about crime rates, property values, whatever it takes." "Randall, this is getting out of control. Maybe we should cut our losses, release the Matthews kid." "Absolutely not. We give in on this, we show weakness. Everything we've built starts to crumble." As Stokes and his allies scrambled to contain the damage, the public reaction was building. By mid-afternoon, a crowd had gathered outside the police station, carrying signs demanding Zion's release and chanting for justice. Linda Gates stood at the front, megaphone in hand. "We've been silent too long. Westridge belongs to all of us, not just the wealthy, not just the white residents, and certainly not to Randall Stokes." The crowd roared in agreement. Among them was Zion's Aunt Patricia, her eyes red from crying, but her expression determined. Inside the station, Chief McAdams watched the growing protest with mounting anxiety. "This is getting out of hand. We should increase patrols, maybe bring in officers from neighboring towns." "No," Jensen argued. "That's what they want, a confrontation. We wait them out. They'll get tired eventually." As tensions rose on the streets, Solomon Matthews was building his legal arsenal. In a conference room at the federal building, he met with a team of DOJ prosecutors and FBI agents. "We move on multiple fronts," Solomon instructed. "Civil rights, violations for Zion's arrest, RICO charges for the broader corruption, financial crimes for the money trail. I want Stokes and everyone in his organization facing so many charges, they'll need a spreadsheet just to keep track." "Sir," one of the prosecutors ventured, "some might say you're too personally involved in this case." "I've recused myself from any decisions directly involving my nephew's arrest," Solomon replied. "But the corruption in Westridge, that falls squarely within my jurisdiction as Attorney General. And I will not recuse myself from fighting systemic injustice just because it happens to have affected my family." As the meeting concluded, Solomon received a text from Agent Matthews. "Whistleblower secured. Ross is ready to testify." It was the break they needed. A first-hand witness to the corruption who could provide testimony from inside the system. But they would need to move quickly to protect Ross before Stokes discovered his betrayal. Meanwhile, in the county courthouse, Judge Leon Graves sat alone in his chambers, staring at a glass of bourbon. The bail hearing for Zion Matthews was scheduled for tomorrow morning, and Stokes's instructions had been clear. Deny bail, transfer the boy to county jail, drag out the proceedings. But for the first time in years, Judge Graves was questioning his role in Stokes's machine. The money had been good, enough to pay off his gambling debts, put his daughter through Princeton, maintain the facade of success. But at what cost? His phone rang. Stokes again. Leon, just confirming our understanding. About tomorrow's hearing, Graves took a long swallow of bourbon. Randall, this has gone too far. The Attorney General himself is involved now. The FBI is in town. There are protesters at the police station. All the more reason to stand firm. We show no weakness. And if I don't cooperate? A pause. Then I'd have to ask myself why I've been so generous to someone so ungrateful. Those gambling debts I paid off? That evidence could resurface. Your daughter's job at my foundation? Unfortunately, positions get eliminated all the time. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Judge Graves closed his eyes, trapped in a prison of his own making. The hearing will proceed as discussed, he said finally, hating the words even as he spoke them. As night fell over Westridge, the battle lines were clearly drawn. On one side stood Randall Stokes and his network of corrupt officials, desperately trying to maintain control. On the other, an unlikely alliance of federal authorities, local activists, and ordinary citizens tired of living under Stokes' shadow. And caught in the middle was Zion Matthews, a 17-year-old honor student whose only crime had been walking home through the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. Tomorrow would bring the bail hearing, a public spectacle that both sides were preparing for. But the real fight was happening in the shadows. Evidence gathered, witnesses secured, strategies formulated. It was, as Solomon had promised Stokes, only the beginning. A silent war had begun in Westridge, one that would expose decades of corruption and change the town forever. The question was no longer if Stokes's empire would fall, but how many he would drag down with him in his desperate attempt to maintain power. In his cell, Zion sat on the thin mattress, trying to maintain hope. He didn't know about the forces mobilizing on his behalf, the protests in the streets, or the federal agents building a case. He knew only the cold walls around him and the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring. But as he closed his eyes, trying to find sleep, one thought gave him comfort. His Uncle Solomon would not abandon him. Help was coming. Justice was coming. He just had to hold on a little longer. Dawn painted Westridge in soft gold as Randall Stokes gazed out from his penthouse, watching his kingdom with increasingly anxious eyes. The Attorney General's ultimatum echoed in his mind. 24 hours. On his desk, 3 phones rang almost simultaneously. "I'm dealing with it," he snapped into the first, not bothering with pleasantries. It was Harold Werner, his head of IT security. "Sir, someone's breached our financial servers." Werner's voice trembled. "They're targeting records of payments to officials, judges, police, everything." Stokes's knuckles whitened around the phone. "Shut it down. Wipe everything. Already started the protocol, but they're good. They might have copies already. Find out who it is and handle it. And Werner, if this gets out, you'll wish the feds found you first." Ending the call, Stokes immediately dialed his most trusted fixer, a man known only as Miller. "We have a situation. I need information scrubbed now, and I need you to deliver a message to our friend in Washington." An hour later, a plain envelope was delivered to Solomon Matthews' temporary office at the federal building. Inside was a single note typed on expensive paper. "Drop this, or your nephew disappears." Solomon didn't flinch as he handed the note. "To an FBI evidence technician. Add this to the file, and double the security detail on my nephew at the police station." Across town, Officer Trevor Ross returned to his apartment after his clandestine meeting with Agent Matthews. He froze in the doorway, drawers emptied onto the floor, furniture slashed, walls spray-painted with a single word: traitor. His phone rang, displaying unknown caller. "Officer Ross," a distorted voice greeted him. "Lovely apartment. Shame what happened to it. Be a bigger shame if something happened to your fiancée Emily at Memorial Hospital. Night shift ends at 11, right? Dark parking lot." Ross's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "A friend with advice. Shut up or end up in a ditch. This is your only warning." The line went dead. Ross's hands shook as he called Agent Matthews. "They know," he said without preamble. "They've threatened Emily. We'll send agents to the hospital immediately, Matthews assured him. Pack a bag. We're moving you both to a safe location. How did they find out so quickly? Stokes has people everywhere, but this shows they're scared. They're getting sloppy. Meanwhile, in the district attorney's office, Paul Hargrove reviewed the case file against Zion Matthews. At 51, Hargrove had built his career by following Stokes's directives, turning a blind eye to corruption while aggressively prosecuting those Stokes wanted eliminated. Make it airtight, Stokes had ordered that morning. I don't care what you have to fabricate, that kid doesn't walk, Hargrove sighed, adding notes to strengthen the charges. Resisting arrest became assault on an officer. Possession became possession with intent to distribute. He drafted false witness statements, created a fictional confidential informant, and backdated everything to appear legitimate. His assistant knocked softly. Sir, the Attorney General's office has requested all files related to Zion Matthews. Tell them it's an ongoing investigation. They need a court order. They already have one, sir. Hargrove cursed under his breath. Stall them. Say the files are being compiled. After she left, he began shredding the original documents that showed the inconsistencies in Jensen's arrest report. What remained would tell the story Stokes wanted. Told, a dangerous drug dealer using his connection to the Attorney General to escape justice. Across town, Agent Matthews received an urgent call from his FBI handler. We've identified our insider in Stokes's organization, the handler explained. Rebecca Wells, his executive assistant for the past 3 years. She's been feeding information to local journalists about smaller corruption cases, but she's terrified of going public. Can we bring her in? She's refusing to leave, says Stokes would know immediately and retaliate against her family, but she's willing to continue providing information from the inside. That's incredibly dangerous. She knows, but she's our best source on Stokes's real-time movements, and she's just sent something critical. Stokes has requested a private meeting with the Attorney General tonight, 7 p.m. at the Westridge Hotel. Matthews frowned. A trap? Possibly. But Wells says Stokes is starting to panic. He might be looking for a way out. That evening, Solomon Matthews arrived at the upscale Westridge Hotel, accompanied by 2 federal agents who remained in the lobby as he took the elevator to the penthouse suite. Stokes waited alone, a glass of bourbon in hand. Attorney General, he greeted, as if they were old friends meeting for drinks. Thank you for coming. Make it quick, Stokes. Your time is running out. Stokes gestured to a chair. I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. This situation with your nephew, an unfortunate misunderstanding that's escalated unnecessarily. Is that what you call framing an innocent teenager? A misunderstanding? Let's be practical. We're both powerful, men with much to lose in a prolonged public battle. Stokes opened a briefcase on the coffee table, revealing stacks of cash. $5 million. Cash, untraceable. Your nephew walks free tomorrow. All charges dropped. Everyone saves face. Solomon didn't even glance at the money. You're attempting to bribe the Attorney General of the United States. I'm offering a businessman's solution to an awkward problem. The only solution is your surrender, Stokes. Full confession, complete cooperation, testimony against your entire network. Stokes's facade of civility cracked. Don't be naive. My network, as you call it, extends far beyond Westridge. Senators, governors, judges at every level. Even if you take me down, my allies will ensure you never work in law enforcement again. Is that supposed to frighten me? It's supposed to enlighten you. Stokes's voice lowered. Even the most powerful men can't protect their families forever. Mr. Attorney General, your nephew today, your sister tomorrow, your children at their fancy private schools. Solomon rose, his expression unchanged but his eyes burning with cold fury. That sounded very much like a threat against my family. A reality check. Take the deal. Everyone walks away intact. No deal. And Stokes? When this is over, you'll wish you'd never heard the name Matthews. As Solomon left the hotel, his car pulled away from the curb, only to be violently sideswiped by a black SUV with tinted windows. The impact sent Solomon's vehicle spinning toward the guardrail of a bridge. Only his driver's quick reflexes prevented them from plunging into the river below. The SUV sped away, no plates visible, as Solomon's security detail called for backup and medical assistance. Though shaken, Solomon refused hospital treatment. It wasn't an accident, he told Agent Matthews, who arrived minutes later. Stokes is getting desperate. All the more reason to move quickly, Matthews replied. We've just executed search warrants on Judge Graves's financial records, offshore accounts, suspicious deposits, properties purchased through shell companies. He's been on Stokes's payroll for years. Solomon straightened his tie, brushing off his security detail's concerns. Prepare the arrest warrants, for all of them. We move tomorrow after the bail hearing. Meanwhile, at the West Ridge police station, Chief McAdams paced his office, pressure building from all sides. Mayor Kessler had been calling hourly, panicking, about the protests growing outside. The FBI had served multiple warrants, and now Officer Ross had disappeared, along with his fiancée. Lieutenant Jensen lounged in a chair, seemingly unconcerned. Ross was always weak. Let him talk. It's his word against mine. It's not just Ross, McAdams snapped. They've got financial records, arrest statistics, your body cam footage that mysteriously disappeared. And now the Attorney General's car gets run off the road? What the hell were you thinking? Jensen shrugged. Wasn't me. But whoever did it had the right idea. Get out of my office. And Jensen, if I go down for this, I'm not going alone. As Jensen left, McAdams pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number only 5 people had access to. It's McAdams. I want immunity. I'll testify against Stokes, tell you everything. The bribes, the cover-ups, everything. But I need protection. The fee. Wheels of justice were turning faster now. As midnight approached, Judge Graves received notification that his accounts had been frozen. The FBI had discovered over $2 million in payments tied directly to cases where he had ruled in favor of Stokes's interests. In his chambers, surrounded by the trappings of respectability he'd sold his soul to acquire, Judge Graves opened his safe and removed a small revolver. He placed it on his desk beside a half-empty bottle of scotch, contemplating his options. His phone rang. Stokes again. I know the feds have your accounts, Stokes said without preamble. Stick to the plan. Deny the Matthews kid bail tomorrow and I'll make sure you're taken care of. Private plane, new identity, accounts in the Caymans. It's over, Randall. They have everything. It's only over if you break. One more day, that's all I need, then you can disappear to somewhere with no extradition. After hanging up, Graves stared at the gun, then at the photo of his daughter on his desk. One more corrupt act to secure his escape. Could he do it? As Westridge held its breath for the morning's bail hearing, the key players in this drama prepared for what would be the turning point in the battle for the town's soul. The courthouse steps teemed with protesters by 8 a.m. National news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like mechanical flowers seeking the sun. Linda Gates stood at the front of the crowd, bullhorn in hand, leading chants for justice. Inside, Zion Matthews sat in a holding cell, dressed in the suit his aunt had brought for him. Despite the bruises still visible on his face, he carried himself with quiet dignity. His Aunt Patricia waited in the courtroom alongside Solomon, who had arrived early to ensure everything was in place. What Stokes and his allies didn't know was that the morning's proceedings would be nothing like what they expected. As Judge Graves entered and court was called to session, the first surprise came immediately. Your Honor, the court clerk announced, we have a last-minute substitution. Judge Martha Reynolds will be presiding today. Judge Graves, who had arrived prepared to deny Zion's bail despite his misgivings, looked stunned. On whose authority? The me. State Judicial Commission, Reynolds replied, taking her place at the bench. You've been temporarily relieved pending an investigation into financial irregularities. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reynolds, a respected judge from a neighboring county with no ties to Westridge politics, was known for her strict adherence to constitutional principles. District Attorney Hargrove approached the bench, flustered. Your Honor, we haven't been notified of any change. We request a continuance to prepare. Denied, Reynolds stated firmly. This young man has been held for 2 days on dubious charges. We proceed now. As the hearing began, the second bombshell dropped. Peter Williamson, former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District and one of the nation's top defense attorneys, stood to represent Zion. Your Honor, the charges against my client are not only baseless, but represent a gross violation of his constitutional rights. We move for immediate dismissal and release. Hargrove scrambled to counter. The defendant was caught with narcotics and physically resisted officers during his arrest. Really? Williamson smiled coldly. Because we have a witness who says otherwise. The courtroom doors opened, and Officer Trevor Ross entered, escorted by FBI agents. The young officer walked to the stand, avoiding Lieutenant Jensen's murderous glare from the gallery. Under oath, Ross detailed everything. Jensen planting the drugs, the excessive force, the destroyed phone, the cover-up afterward. His testimony was devastating, laying bare the conspiracy against Zion in methodical, irrefutable detail. When he finished, Judge Reynolds didn't hesitate. The charges against Zion Matthews are dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Matthews, you are free to go. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Outside, the crowd roared as the news spread, but the morning's surprises weren't over. As Hargrove gathered his papers, federal marshals entered the courtroom. Paul Hargrove, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Similar scenes played out across Westridge. At the police station, FBI agents led Chief McAdams away in handcuffs, having flipped on Stokes in exchange for leniency. Judge Graves surrendered quietly when agents arrived at his home. Lieutenant Jensen, seeing the writing on the wall, had slipped out of the courthouse during Ross's testimony. He made it as far as the Canadian border before being apprehended, a bag containing $50,000 cash and a fake passport in his possession. But the biggest target remained at large. Randall Stokes had gone to ground, missing their attempt to arrest him at his penthouse. As federal agents searched his properties, a new player emerged from the shadows. Jacob Miller, Stokes' longtime accountant, walked into the FBI field office voluntarily. For years, he had secretly documented every bribe, every threat, every illegal deal, building an insurance policy against the day Stokes might turn on him. I can't live with it anymore, Miller told Agent Matthews, not after seeing what they did to that kid. On national television, Miller detailed Stokes' criminal empire, the judges he owned, the politicians he controlled, the witnesses who had been threatened or bought off. Most damning were the financial records showing millions flowing to officials who had helped Stokes eliminate business competitors and silence critics. As Miller's interview aired, protesters surrounded Stokes' tower, their numbers swelling into the thousands. The facade of respectability that had protected Westridge's corruption for so long was crumbling by the hour. In his hidden lake house 50 miles from town, Stokes watched his empire disintegrate on live television. His phones rang constantly, panicked allies, lawyers, fixers, all demanding guidance or offering desperate deals. One call, however, he answered immediately. "Have you done it?" he demanded. "It's too hot," the voice replied. "Federal agents everywhere. No way to get to the kid." "I don't want excuses. I want Matthews to suffer. Find a way." But Stokes had miscalculated the level of surveillance now, focused on him. The call was intercepted, providing the final evidence needed for attempted murder charges. Solomon Matthews, watching the case unfold from the federal building, received word of the intercepted call. "He's at the lake house," Agent Matthews confirmed. "SWAT is moving in now." "I want to be there," Solomon insisted. "Sir, that's not protocol." "I don't give a damn about protocol. This man threatened my family." Within the hour, Solomon stood, watching as federal agents surrounded the expansive property. Stokes had barricaded himself inside with 3 armed security guards, refusing to surrender. "Randall Stokes," the SWAT commander announced through a bullhorn, "you are surrounded. Exit the building with your hands up." No response came from the house. After repeated warnings, the SWAT team prepared to breach. Just then, a black SUV burst from the garage, accelerating toward the perimeter. Agents scattered as the vehicle crashed through a barricade, speeding toward the private airstrip behind the property, where Stokes kept his jet fueled and ready. A high-speed pursuit ensued, with police helicopters tracking the SUV's desperate flight. At the airstrip, Stokes and his security team abandoned the vehicle, racing toward the waiting jet. They never made it. Federal agents had secured the plane hours earlier, anticipating this escape route. As Stokes realized he was trapped, he raised his hands slowly. "It's over, Randall," Solomon said, approaching with agents flanking him. "Your corruption ends today." "You've made a mistake," Stokes replied, his composure finally cracking. "My friends are abandoning you as we speak," Solomon finished. "Your friends in Washington are already distancing themselves, claiming they barely knew you. That's how corruption works, Randall. Everyone's loyal until they're not." As Stokes was led away in handcuffs, Lieutenant Jensen, who had been caught and transported back to Westridge, saw one last opportunity to save himself. "I want a deal," he told the federal prosecutor. "I'll testify against Stokes. I know everything. Who he bribed, who he threatened, who he had killed." "You're too late," the prosecutor replied coldly. "We already have multiple witnesses with clean records. You planted evidence on an innocent teenager and tried to destroy his life. No deals for you." Back in Westridge, the mayor called an emergency press conference, desperately trying to salvage his political career. "I was misled by people I trusted," he claimed, sweat beading on his forehead. "I had no knowledge of any illegal activity." Few believed him. By evening, the governor had announced a state takeover of Westridge's government pending special elections, and a special prosecutor to review every case handled during Stokes's reign. As the sun set on a day that had changed Westridge forever, Zion Matthews sat with his family in his aunt's living room, still processing everything that had happened. "You never told me your uncle was the Attorney General," Linda Gates said, having been invited to the small gathering to thank her for her bravery. Zion smiled slightly. "I didn't want special treatment. I just wanted to be known for my own achievements." "You will be," Solomon assured him. "But from now on, no more secrets between us. Secrecy only protects the corrupt." Outside, the streets of Westridge were quiet for the first time in days. The protests had transformed into celebrations as news spread of Stokes's arrest and the dismantling of his network. Officer Ross and his fiancée, now under federal protection, watched the coverage from a safe location, knowing they had helped spark a transformation. What no one realized yet was how far the ripples would spread. In the coming days, investigations would expand beyond Westridge, following Stokes's money and influence to other towns, other officials, other corrupted systems. The quiet teen who had simply been walking home from the library had unwittingly exposed a cancer that had been growing for decades, and in doing so, he had taken the first step toward healing a community long divided by wealth, power, and race. The morning after Stokes's arrest dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself was celebrating Westridge's liberation. In the federal prosecutor's office, a team of attorneys and FBI agents gathered around a conference table covered with documents, photos, and financial records, the accumulated evidence of decades of corruption. Solomon Matthews stood at the head of the table, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. He hadn't slept properly in days, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. "This goes beyond Westridge," he said, pointing to a map where red pins marked towns and cities across 3 states. "Stokes's influence extends to county officials in these jurisdictions, judges in these districts, and legislators in these states. This isn't just about my nephew anymore. It's about systematic corruption that has harmed thousands of people." Agent Cole Matthews nodded, adding another document to the evidence pile. "We've identified over 30 officials who took direct payments from Stokes, plus dozens more who benefited indirectly. This is potentially the largest corruption case in the state's history." "And we're just getting started," Solomon replied. "I want every rock turned over, every connection traced. If someone took Stokes' money, I want them held accountable." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent knock. An FBI agent entered, expression grim. "Sir, we have a situation. The judge has granted Stokes bail." "What?" Solomon's voice was dangerously quiet. "On what grounds?" "Judge Wilson from the federal court in Albany." Stokes's lawyers argued he's not a flight risk due to his business interests, offered to surrender his passport and put up $10 million bond. Solomon's jaw tightened. Judge Wilson, check his financial records immediately. This isn't over. While the federal investigation expanded, Zion Matthews was adjusting to his newfound freedom. Sitting at his aunt's kitchen table that morning, he picked at his breakfast, still processing the events of the past few days. "You've barely touched your food," Aunt Patricia noted, concern etching her features. "I'm not very hungry," Zion admitted. "It's just a lot to take in. 3 days ago I was in a jail cell. Now I'm all over the news." Patricia squeezed his shoulder gently. "You don't have to talk to any reporters if you don't want to. Your uncle's press team can handle that." "It's not that." Zion hesitated, searching for words. "When I was arrested, I was just me, a regular kid. Now everyone sees me as this symbol. That's because what happened to you happens to so many young black men who don't have an attorney general for an uncle," Patricia said softly. "The difference is, you got justice. They often don't." Zion nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I think I need to speak out, use this platform to help others." Before Patricia could respond, Zion's new phone buzzed with a message from Solomon. "Stokes made bail. Stay vigilant. Security detail remains in place. Call if you need anything." Across town, Randall Stokes was returning to his penthouse, accompanied by his high-priced legal team. Despite the electronic monitoring bracelet on his ankle and the federal agents watching his building, he projected an air of confidence. "The prosecution's case is built on the testimony of criminals and traitors," his lead attorney James Barton assured him. "Officer Ross is compromised, Chief McAdams was saving his own skin, and your accountant Miller violated confidentiality agreements. We'll discredit them all." Stokes nodded absently, gazing out at the town he had controlled for so long. "And Judge Wilson?" "Has agreed to hear our motion to dismiss the federal charges," Barton confirmed. "His appreciation for your past support remains intact." "Good." Stokes turned, a cold smile forming. "The Matthews family thinks they've won, but they've just started a war they can't finish." What Stokes didn't know was that his bail hearing had triggered a separate investigation into Judge Wilson's finances. By noon, FBI analysts had discovered suspicious deposits to an offshore account linked to the judge, coinciding with major rulings favorable to Stokes's business interests. Solomon wasted no time. He personally called the chief judge of the federal circuit, presenting the evidence and requesting an emergency reassignment of Stokes's case. "I want the strongest judge you have," Solomon insisted. "Someone with an impeccable record who can't be bought or intimidated." By mid-afternoon, Stokes's legal victory had evaporated. Judge Wilson was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, and Stokes's case was reassigned to Judge Amelia Rodriguez, a former prosecutor known for her harsh stance on public corruption. The news hit Stokes like a physical blow. "Wilson was our ace," he snapped at Barton. "Who else do we have on the federal bench?" "No one who'll touch this case now," Barton admitted. "The scrutiny is too intense. Rodriguez is untouchable. She's rejected every case where there might be even a hint of conflict of interest." For the first time, genuine fear flickered in Stokes's eyes. "Then we need leverage. Something on the Matthews family. Dig deeper. Everyone has secrets." But Stokes's options were dwindling by the hour. His phones were monitored, his movements tracked, his assets frozen. Former allies were scrambling to distance themselves, with many reaching out to prosecutors to negotiate their own deals. At the FBI field office, a new development was unfolding. Rebecca Wells, Stokes's executive assistant who had been secretly providing information, arrived for a formal interview. "I should have come forward sooner," she told Agent Matthews, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "But I was afraid. Stokes. He doesn't just threaten you. He threatens your family." "You're here now," Matthews reassured her, "and your testimony will be invaluable." What Wells revealed next stunned even the experienced federal agents. She had maintained a detailed log of Stokes's activities for years, including meetings with Officials, payoffs, threats, and even discussions of violent retaliation against opponents. He called it his insurance policy, Wells explained, producing a flash drive. This contains records of every corrupt deal he made in the last 5 years. Account numbers, dates, amounts. He kept meticulous notes. I made copies without his eyes. Knowledge. As agents reviewed the files, the scope of Stokes's corruption became clearer and darker. Beyond the bribes and influence peddling were records of more sinister activities: blackmail, ordered assaults, and, most disturbing, the details of 3 suspicious deaths previously ruled as accidents or suicides. One name in particular stood out: Michael Donovan, a local reporter who had been investigating Stokes's real estate deals. His car had gone off a mountain road 2 years earlier, officially ruled an accident. But Stokes's records showed a payment of $50,000 to Lieutenant Jensen just days before, with the note, "Donovan problem resolved." Solomon reviewed the evidence with growing anger. This isn't just corruption anymore, it's murder. With this new evidence, prosecutors moved quickly. To revoke Stokes's bail, Judge Rodriguez signed the warrant immediately, and federal agents descended on Stokes Tower once again. But Stokes had vanished. The electronic monitoring bracelet had been removed and left behind, a sophisticated job that suggested professional help. His private security team claimed ignorance, but cell phone records showed calls to a known associate with connections to private military contractors. "He's running," Solomon concluded grimly. "Put out an alert to all airports, train stations, and border crossings. Check his helicopter and plane records." The manhunt intensified as night fell. Police helicopters circled Westridge, while FBI agents raided properties owned by Stokes and his associates. The national media descended on the town, transforming a local corruption case into headline news across the country. In his aunt's house, now guarded by federal agents, Zion watched the coverage with growing concern. "Will they find him?" he asked Solomon, who had stopped by to check on them. "Count on it," Solomon assured him. "Stokes made a critical mistake. Running makes him look guilty to everyone, even his remaining supporters. He's burned his last bridges. Across town." Lieutenant Wade Jensen sat in a holding cell, watching the same news coverage on a small television. The reporter mentioned the investigation into Michael Donovan's death, and Jensen's face drained of color. "I need to talk to a prosecutor," he told the guard. "Now, I'm ready to deal." Within the hour, Jensen was sitting across from federal prosecutors, desperate to save himself from a potential murder charge. "I didn't kill Donovan," he insisted, sweating profusely. "I just made sure the investigation went nowhere. Stokes told me what to do. He has a guy, ex-military, does his dirty work. Name's Miller, Jack Miller." "Where would Stokes go if he was running?" the prosecutor pressed. Jensen hesitated, weighing his options. Finally, self-preservation won out. "He has a compound in the Adirondacks, off the grid, heavily secured. Not in his name, held by a shell company. That's where he'd go to ground." By midnight, FBI tactical teams were preparing for a raid on the remote compound. Satellite imagery confirmed activity at the location: lights, vehicles, guards patrolling the perimeter. "He's cornered and desperate," the tactical commander warned. "This won't be a peaceful surrender." Solomon insisted on being nearby during the operation, despite security concerns. "This ends tonight," he said firmly. "One way or another." In the pre-dawn darkness, federal agents surrounded the compound. Thermal imaging showed at least 6 individuals inside the main house, with armed guards patrolling the grounds. "Federal agents, we have a warrant for Randall Stokes's arrest." The announcement came over loudspeakers, shattering the mountain silence. "The compound is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." For several tense minutes, there was no response. Then gunfire erupted from one of the guard posts, and the FBI tactical team returned fire. What followed was a brief but intense firefight. 2 of Stokes's security personnel were wounded, while the others quickly surrendered when they realized they were outmatched. As agents approached the main house, an explosion rocked the northern side of the compound. Stokes had rigged a diversion. Through the smoke and confusion, A figure raced toward a helipad where a helicopter waited, rotors already spinning. Suspect. Fleeing to aircraft, an agent shouted into his radio. Snipers had their sights on the helicopter, but couldn't risk firing with Stokes inside. They needed him alive to testify against his network. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply toward the Canadian border just 60 miles away. But Stokes had overlooked one critical detail. The FBI had anticipated this escape route and placed a pursuit helicopter nearby. What followed was a desperate aerial chase through the darkened mountains. Stokes's pilot pushed the helicopter to its limits, flying dangerously low to avoid radar detection. The pursuit ended dramatically when Stokes's helicopter, running low on fuel, attempted to land at an abandoned logging camp. As it touched down, FBI agents converged from all directions. Cornered at last, Randall Stokes emerged with his hands raised, his empire in ruins, his allies abandoning him, and his freedom finished. Randall Stokes, Solomon Matthews announced, personally, walking forward as agents secured the billionaire. You're under arrest for corruption, racketeering, conspiracy, and murder. For a moment, the two men locked eyes, power facing justice, corruption facing accountability. This isn't over, Matthews, Stokes spat. Yes, Randall, Solomon replied calmly. It is. As dawn broke over the mountains, Stokes was led away in handcuffs, and the news quickly spread across Westridge and beyond. The man who had controlled an entire town through fear and money had finally fallen. Back in Westridge, residents gathered spontaneously in the town square as the news spread. For many, it was the first time they had felt truly free in years. Linda Gates stood among them, tears streaming down her face. I never thought I'd see this day, she told a reporter. For years, we lived under his shadow. Today, we start rebuilding. The foundations for that rebuilding were already being laid. Governor Harrison had appointed an interim town council composed of respected community members with no ties to the previous administration. State police would oversee law enforcement until a new police chief could be properly vetted and appointed. For Zion Matthews, the ordeal that had begun with a simple walk home from the library was nearing its conclusion. But its impact would shape the rest of his life and the future of Westridge in ways no one could have anticipated. 6 months after Randall Stokes's dramatic capture, Westridge was a town transformed. The oppressive shadow that had hung over the community for decades had lifted, allowing the first fragile shoots of genuine democracy and accountability to emerge. On a crisp fall morning, Zion Matthews stood on the steps of the newly renamed Community Justice Center, formerly the Stokes Municipal Building. Now 18, he had grown taller over the summer, his lean frame filling out, but it was the newfound confidence in his bearing that most people noticed. I never wanted to be a symbol, he told the assembled crowd, his voice strong and clear. I was just a kid walking home from the library. But what happened to me happens to black and brown people across this country every day. The difference is, I had resources and connections that many don't. The crowd listened in respectful silence. Among them were familiar faces from Zion's ordeal. Linda Gates, now serving on the town council, Trevor Ross, who had left law enforcement and was working with a police accountability organization, and various community members who had stood up during Westridge's darkest days. The scholarship being announced today isn't about me, Zion continued. It's about recognizing that true justice requires equal access to education, opportunity, and legal representation. The Westridge Justice Scholarship will provide those resources to students from marginalized communities who want to pursue careers in law, public policy, or criminal justice reform. The applause was thunderous. In the front row, Aunt Patricia wiped away tears of pride, while beside her, Solomon Matthews nodded approvingly. The Matthews family had personally funded the initial endowment, but corporations and foundations had quickly matched their contribution, creating a multi-million-dollar program that would support generations of students. While Zion's public profile had grown, the legal consequences for those involved in his wrongful arrest had played out largely behind closed doors. Lieutenant Wade Jensen's cooperation had earned him a reduced sentence, 20 years instead of life, for his role in Michael Donovan's death and other crimes. Former Chief McAdams received 15 years for corruption and civil rights violations, while Judge Graves was sentenced to 12 years. District Attorney Hargrove, facing disbarment and criminal charges, had taken his own life 2 months after his arrest, leaving a note expressing remorse for the lives he had damaged through his corruption. But the most severe consequences were reserved for Randall Stokes himself. Facing multiple life sentences, he had finally agreed to a plea deal: 30 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, in exchange for testimony that helped prosecutors unravel his extensive network of corruption. The man who once owned a town now spent his days in a standard prison cell, his empire dismantled, his assets seized, his name synonymous with corruption. After the scholarship announcement, Zion met with Trevor Ross, who had become something of a mentor to him over the past months. "You did good up there," Ross told him, the guilt still visible in his eyes despite all that had happened. "I still think about that night. If I had spoken up sooner." "You did speak up," Zion reminded him. "When it mattered most. That took courage." Ross nodded, though the weight of his initial silence would likely always haunt him. "How's the college search going?" Zion smiled. "Got accepted to Princeton. Early decision." "That's amazing. Political science?" "Pre-law, actually." Zion's expression grew more serious. "What happened to me? It changed how I see things. I always thought success meant keeping my head down, working hard, not making waves. But now I understand that the system itself needs changing, and that requires people willing to work from inside it." While Zion had found his path forward, Westridge itself was still healing. The special prosecutor appointed by the governor had reviewed hundreds of cases handled during Stokes's reign, resulting in dozens of overturned convictions. People who had been wrongfully imprisoned were being released, their records expunged, their lives slowly rebuilt. The police department had been completely restructured, with extensive new oversight, body cameras that couldn't be disabled, and a civilian review board that included Linda Gates and other community activists. The new chief, a respected veteran from another state with a record of progressive reforms, had made it her mission to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the community. Most significantly, the racial disparities that had characterized Westridge's justice system for generations were being systematically addressed. Arrest rates had equalized across demographics, while community policing initiatives had replaced the aggressive tactics of the Stokes era. After the ceremony, Solomon pulled Zion aside for a private conversation. "I'm proud of you," he said simply, "not just for how you've handled the attention, but for what you're choosing to do with it." "I learned from the best," Zion replied with a small smile. Solomon's expression grew more serious. "There's something I want to discuss with you. The president has asked me to lead a new Justice Department initiative on police reform and accountability. It would mean using what happened here in Westridge as a template for addressing systemic issues nationwide." Zion considered this. "Will it make a difference? Real change, not just window dressing?" "That's my condition for taking it on," Solomon confirmed. "No half measures, no political compromises on the core principles. The president has agreed." "Then you have to do it," Zion said firmly. "What happened to me led to change here, but it needs to happen everywhere." Later that afternoon, Zion visited Westridge High School, where he had once kept his head down, careful not to draw attention to himself or his family connections. Now, he was greeted as a returning hero, invited to speak to students about his experience and the importance of civic engagement. In the audience was Jason, the student Zion had been tutoring the night of his arrest. "I still feel bad," Jason admitted when they spoke afterward. "If you hadn't stayed late helping me with calculus, then it would have happened another night, or to someone else," Zion assured him. "And without the video, without my uncle's position, it might have ended very differently. The point isn't what happened to me, it's what happens to people who don't have those advantages." As Zion walked through the school hallways, he noticed something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier: Black, white, and Latino students talking together, planning a voter registration drive, discussing the upcoming special election. Westridge's younger generation seemed determined not to repeat the mistakes of their parents. That evening, Zion joined his aunt and uncle for dinner at a local restaurant, the same one that had refused service to black customers through various subtle tactics during the Stokes era. Now under new management, it made a point of welcoming everyone, with a diverse staff and clientele. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed," Aunt Patricia remarked, looking around the bustling dining room. "And how much hasn't?" Solomon added more soberly. "Stokes may be gone, but the conditions that allowed him to flourish exist in towns and cities across the country. One case, however high profile, doesn't change that." "It's a start, though," Zion insisted. "And that's something." As they finished dinner, a young black boy, no more than 7 or 8, approached their table hesitantly, his mother watching, nervously from nearby. "Are you Zion Matthews?" the child asked, eyes wide with admiration. Zion nodded, smiling. "I am. My mom says you stood up to bad police and helped make our town better." "A lot of people did that," Zion corrected gently. "I just happened to be in the right place at the wrong time." The boy considered this with childhood gravity. "I want to be like you when I grow up, not afraid." Something tightened in Zion's chest. "What's your name?" "Michael." "Well, Michael, I was afraid. Being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what's right even when you are afraid." "That," boy nodded solemnly, as if receiving profound wisdom, then returned to his mother, who mouthed a silent, "Thank you" to Zion. After dinner, Zion walked along the streets of Westridge alone, retracing the route he had taken that fateful night. The same houses stood along the same quiet streets, but everything else had changed, including Zion himself. As he passed the spot where Jensen had slammed him against the patrol car, he paused, allowing himself to remember the fear, the helplessness, the injustice of that moment. The memories would always be there, but they no longer had the power to control him. Reaching the park at the center of town, Zion sat on a bench, watching as families enjoyed the early evening, children playing without fear, neighbors greeting each other across racial lines that had once seemed impermeable. A group of young black kids played basketball nearby, laughing and trash-talking with the unself-conscious joy of childhood. One of them noticed Zion and nudged his friends. They stopped their game, whispering among themselves, before the boldest approached. "You're him, right? The one who took down Stokes?" Zion smiled. "I had a lot of help." The kids gathered around, peppering him with questions about the FBI, about his uncle, about what it felt like to be famous. Zion answered patiently, emphasizing the roles that courage, community, and justice had played in changing Westridge. As twilight deepened into evening, the kids reluctantly dispersed, called home by parents for dinner, but their admiring glances lingered, and Zion understood that for them, he represented something powerful, the possibility that justice could prevail, that one person could make a difference. Walking home in the gathering darkness, Zion felt none of the fear that had accompanied this same journey months earlier. The streets belonged to everyone now. The shadows no longer concealed corruption and threats, but simply the natural transition from day to night. In the quiet streets of Westridge, a new chapter was beginning, and Zion Matthews, once just a quiet teen trying to avoid attention, would help write it. If you found this story compelling, please hit that like button to help others discover it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives that explore the complex intersection of justice, power, and accountability in America. Comment below with your thoughts on how we might build communities where justice doesn't depend on who your family is or what neighborhood you live in.